An American Viking of the Air. The Outlook, June 1st, 1927. Charles Lindbergh, 25 years old, American, climbed out of his airplane on Le Bourget flying field near Paris. A score of men lifted him and let him down to the ground. A multitude, numbering thousands, encircled him. "Well," he said, "I did it." Did what? He had no idea of what he had done. He thought he had simply flown alone from New York to Paris. What he had really done was something far greater. He had fired the imagination of mankind. He had evoked all that was best in men's hearts and minds. He had erased rancor and suspicion and had lighted a flame of goodwill. He had started a clean breeze around the world. He had somehow imparted to his fellow men, without respect of race or nation, a new vigor. What this young airmail pilot has accomplished, no one could have foreseen. He, least of all, anticipated the effect of his flight. He started out with a razor, a toothbrush, a passport, and 6 letters of introduction in his pocket. Apparently, he thought that when he arrived, he would need to clean up, have a shave, and then start out to make some acquaintances in a land of strangers. Those things that he carried in his pocket were symbols of his achievement. This fellow, who has been received in France with honors usually reserved for a ruling monarch or president, who has received an acclaim from the world like that enjoyed by few men in history, has won his greatest triumph just because he never once thought of it. If there had been any element of braggadocio, of false pretense, of self-seeking, of vanity in Charles Lindbergh, he couldn't have done what he did. He might have flown to Paris and won the $25,000 of the Orteig Prize for the first flight to that city from New York, but he could never have stirred the world into admiration. "We could have gone 1,000 miles more," he said, "or at least 500. "What do you mean by we?" he was asked. "Well, you know," he answered, "the ship was with me." He has been nicknamed Lucky. He deprecates the term. Luck, he declares, is not enough. Does he mention daring, or skill, or intelligence? No. It is his plane, an engine, and instruments. Charles Lindbergh is the heir of all that we like to think is best in America. He is of the stuff out of which have been made the pioneers that opened up the wilderness, first on the Atlantic coast and then in our great West. His are the qualities which we, as a people, must nourish. They are certainly the qualities that win, throughout the world, instant recognition and praise. Sharing by right in the glory that is Charles Lindbergh's is his mother. She traveled from her home in Detroit to New York to bid him goodbye. Then, before he started, she went back to her work as an instructor in the Cass Technical High School. She is the widow of Charles August Lindbergh, who was a representative in Congress for 10 years, was in turn a Republican, progressive, and farmer laborite, and when he died, the farmer labor candidate for governor of Minnesota. It is undoubtedly to her training as well as to his Swedish and Irish inheritance that the son owes the development of those qualities which have brought him to this extraordinary triumph. She has received deserved congratulations and great honor. She has accepted them only by proxy. "The glory belongs to him," she has said, "but the boy belongs to me and America." Evidently, she has always wanted her boy to be himself. She has described his education and has made it clear that throughout, her purpose has been to make it possible for him to develop and train himself. One of the councilmen of the city of Detroit has commented upon Mrs. Lindbergh's training of her son in these words: "Because we love our children, we are inclined to repress them. Mrs. Lindbergh was wise enough to allow her son to shape his own destiny. It is that sort of mother which gets the tribute which her son paid to her." He had arrived in Paris Saturday night. On Sunday morning, he was talking with his mother by radiophone. In the glory of this triumph, not the least share belongs to the French people. Their generous reception of the American aviator while the grief over the loss of their own transatlantic flyers, Nungesser and Colley, was fresh, is the surest evidence of French character. If the victor in this competition had been one of themselves, his reception could not well have been more glorious. And Charles Lindbergh showed that the tribute that they gave him was deserved, for the first visit he made in Paris was to the mother of Nungesser. Moreover, in his first speech to the Aero Club, he paid tribute to Nungesser and Colley, in which he said that their heroic effort was a far greater project than the one completed Saturday night. And he expressed the hope that the brave French airmen may yet be found. Meanwhile, De Pinedo, the daring Italian, who set out for his return journey to Rome, failed to reach his first stop at the Azores. Wireless reports have been received, however, bringing the welcome news that, more fortunate than Nungesser and Colley, De Pinedo has been picked up from the ocean by a passing vessel. The flight that ended at Le Bourget began almost unheralded. It had been known that a young airman male pilot had entered as a competitor for the prize of $25,000 which had been offered by Raymond Orteig, a New York hotel man of French nativity. Others were preparing for the transatlantic flight. The Belanca plane was tuning up on Long Island and was the chief center of interest. Almost without warning, young Lindbergh came from San Diego, California. He stopped only once on his transcontinental flight. That was at St. Louis. He had scarcely arrived in New York before he seemed ready to start again eastward. Then, early one morning, he was up, went out to his plane, and as soon as his fuel tank was filled, started on his transatlantic flight. In his cramped cockpit, he faced his fuel tank and instrument board. All that he could see ahead was through a periscope. On each side of him was a window. Down below him was an opening through which he could look to learn of what is known as the drift of his machine. He had no navigator with him. He said he preferred to save the weight. Perhaps also he preferred to save possibilities of a difference of opinion on the way. At any rate, he took an inductor compass. This is an instrument, American-made, which sets up an electrical field that holds an indicator in constant relationship with the magnetic lines of force on the Earth. Thanks to this instrument, Lindbergh arrived over Ireland within 3 miles of his objective. On the way, he encountered a sleet storm that threatened to cover the wings of his plane with ice and drag him down, but his skill and courage enabled him to fly out of trouble. He swept from 10 feet above the water to 10,000 feet, seeking a level where the sleet was not. At last he saw the Seine, then the lights of Paris, then the flying field, and then the shouting, overwhelming multitude. Now he wears the decoration of the Legion of Honor and is threatened with a medal from Congress. He apparently can have any job he wants, from vaudeville up or down, but he says he wants to get back to the airmail service, if they will take him.